All right, now let's get into the lower portion of the arm where we have the radius and the ulna. And I just took them apart. Dang it. Okay, put them back together. Okay, so when you're looking at this, this is the ulna, this is the radius. And they kind of fit together like this. They're only touching in two small spots at the top and the bottom. So it's gonna be tough for me to kind of hold this and still make this work. So this is actually a posterior view. So if you're looking at an anterior view, get these put together. I gotta see them to put them together. Okay. So here they are. Here's your anterior view. All right. So this is the front, and this is the right. So this would represent the bottom of your right arm. So from the elbow down. So here, this one is the ulna. The ulna forms most of the elbow. So if you think about this as like the bend of your elbow back here, it's a little bit easier to note. I always remember learn these as the ulna is what runs with the pinky. So the pinky and the ulna, PU, kind of goes together. Use whatever little mnemonic device you need, whatever helps you remember these. Okay, so this is the ulna, this is the radius. Ulna goes along the pinky, radius goes along kind of the thumb, forefinger area. All right, so here is your anterior view. I'm on page 279 in the book or page 9 of the handout. So the only things you need to know about the radius, so here's the radius, are you need to know that this is the radius, and so the radius has more of like a it has a larger distal end, smaller proximal end. The ulna has the larger proximal end, the smaller distal end. And again, how I can get these to kind of connect is a little bit tricky, but how I hold them is okay. There we go. So now, on the radius, the head of the radius is this part. This is the head of the radius. Imagine that. So the head of the radius from the anterior or from the posterior is just the top. So the head of the radius, so this is going to be on the proximal end, the closer point to the elbow, closer to the trunk. And then you need to know the radial tuberosity. So this is where the biceps are actually going to connect in or on the radius. So it's also going to be up near the top. On the anterior view, it's this notch right here, this notch. That's where, so the biceps connect the shoulder and the forearm, so they have to cross the elbow. So they're actually going to connect at the radius, and that's what pulls your arm up. More on that in A&P 2. All right. So the radial tuberosity, this notch right here in the front. All right, so now let's talk about the parts of the ulna. There's several of these. So the first one is the trochlear process. The trochlear notch. The trochlear notch, so this whole thing is the olecranon. So the trochlear notch is right here, and this is going to fit in with the trochlear portion of the radius. Look at that, we made an elbow. Oh, that is so beautiful. So, woo. So here we said this is the trochlea of the radius, fits in with the trochlea of the ulna. How about that? So there's the trochlear notch. So this is like the cup or the receiving portion of this. All right, so this here, again, where the ulna receives the humerus to form part of the elbow, the trochlear notch right here at the top. Now, you also need to know the olecranon process. So the olecranon process is the part on the back. Turn these around, without messing them up. All right, so the olecranon process is, make sure I get this right, on the posterior view, this right here. Yeah, so there, so process, kind of what sticks out. So there's the olecranon process on, from the back. Next, let's flip back over to the front. You have the coronoid fossa. So again, this is where the toes from the humerus are going to be fitting into the ulna to form the elbow. So you have the we had the olecranon process, which is this right here. This right here. The trochlear notch right there. This whole big portion is the olecranon up here. So here's the trochlear, and then you have the coronoid process, which is just a small portion right down here in front. So that's where the coronoid is going to fit on in there. Fits into, this actually fits into the coronoid process, so it'd be up here on the humerus. So look at that. Look at that. Way cool. And we have made an elbow. So as you bend the elbow, you see how this portion fits up in here. So there's a region up in there. So this part here, as you bend the elbow, there's room in the humerus to receive that. Otherwise, you couldn't bend your elbow that much. So when you really flex, the ulna has to actually extend into this portion of the radius, or sorry, of the humerus. So that would be this portion here, the coronoid process. Next, you have the radial notch. The radial notch is where, well, the radius fits in. Imagine that. So let me get these connected again, where they're supposed to be. There. All right. So that would be this portion right here. That's where the radius is going to fit in. So the radial notch, so where the radius fits in. Right there. And you can see it from the front or the back. But there it is. Oh, it's so beautiful. All right. So notice these are only connected at two small points there, and then you have the head of the ulna. The head of the ulna is actually the bottom. So this is the head of the ulna. The head of the radius is up here. The head of the ulna is down here. This is all elbow, portions of the elbow. So head of the ulna is down there. Let's go ahead and let's get into the hand. Fortunately, I did not have to, remember these are models, these are not real bones. This is a right hand. So I'm going to try to point these out on the hand, and I'll also point them out on my hand because sometimes it's just easier to have some reference. So when you're going to look at the hand, you want to be on page 280 in the textbook, or you want to be on page 9 of the handout. So right at the bottom of the radius of the ulna, you're going to have the wrist. So the wrist is going to have these carpals. The carpals, these are these little pebble areas. There's 8 of them. You do not have to know the specific names of them. Just know that these are the carpals. There's 8 of them. And then you have 5 hand bones. These are the metacarpals. Metacarpals, this is what forms the palm of your hand. So these long bones here, these are metacarpals. So you have carpals in the wrist, and then you have metacarpals in the hand. After that, and so there's 5, one for each finger and the thumb. And then you have your phalanges. And your 4 fingers have 3 phalanges, your thumb has 2. So in the first phalange, or the phalange that you come to, is closest to your trunk. So it's the proximal phalange. So so this is the proximal, and the first portion of the thumb is also proximal. On your fingers, since they have 3, There's one in the middle. So these are the middle phalanges, or the middle phalanges. Middle phalanges. Now the thumb does not have a middle one because it only has two. So it has a proximal, and then the ones at the very end, those are distal. So distal, 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 and the thumb only has a proximal and a distal. It does not have a middle one. So now let's look on that on your hand. And what does this look like? So this is my left hand. So here's my humerus. Here is my radius going along the top of the arm. This is kind of, so that would be this portion that you feel like your forearm there of the radius. If you feel your forearm going on down. Okay, and then the ulna is running along the back of my arm there. So then I get to my wrist, and so just kind of feel your wrist. It just kind of feels like you can't feel one particular bone. There's just a bunch of them jumbled all in there. Okay, and then you get to, so these are your carpals right here in the wrist. So that's what, you know, kind of allows you to move your hand all the way around. Next, you have your metacarpals. So these are your hand bones. So look, if you flex real good, you can usually see them. You can pretty much feel them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these are the bones in the hand. Actually, in the hand, they form the palm of the hand on this side. So you can feel 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So like these pads, that would be the inner, or the, I don't know, down portion. So there's also, you can feel, these are metacarpals. Carpals in the wrist, metacarpals in the hand. Now let's get into the phalanges. The first one, proximal, 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 proximal. This is the point between your the meaty part of your hand and your first joint. So your first knuckle joint there. Okay, so from the base of the finger to the first joint, these are your proximal phalanges. And now in your fingers, where you can bend them all, you can bend them all, and you can make a bridge. So the middle, so between your two finger joints, this is your middle phalange, middle phalange, middle phalange, middle phalange. So you only have 4 middles. And then on the end, where your nail is, these are your distals. Distals. Distal, 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 distal. 5. So in the wrist, you have 8 carpals, 5 metacarpals, 5 proximal phalanges, 4 middle phalanges, 5 distal phalanges.